Hey guys, this is Steven. Welcome to the history of FMW. This is going to be episode 6. We're going to cover the second half of 1991. This is going to be a lot of stuff with Wing is going to show up. But first, Brett, you wanted to go over a correction from last episode concerning Delta Dawn.
Yeah, so I made mention last episode about Delta Dawn being the former Bertha Faye, but I actually ended up finding out information that it was actually that Delta Dawn was actually Dawn Murphy, friend who is a Vancouver women's wrestler in the late '80s. So I just wanted to make that correction real quick that Delta Dawn is still alive, unlike what I stated earlier about her being Bertha Faye.
Cool. Now, last episode we ended with the split of Wing. For those who didn't hear it, basically Mr. Pogo and a couple of the front office, they got tired of Onita not sharing the wealth that FMW is kind of bringing in, and they went off and they split, and they teamed with Victor Quinones to form Wing. When this happens, is there any panic in the FMW office?
Not really. It's kind of like for WWE, like when Vince Russo left. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say that that Vince Russo is anywhere near the creative that anyone that dealt with Wing was, but it was kind of like that, where it's like, okay, you're moving on. Well, you're leaving. Well, we're going to move on without you. And we're going to do better. And they were still doing really well. So, there might have been a couple guys, worried like, there's changes being made. But, I don't think Onita or anyone really top of the promotion really worried too much, because they were making so much money at this point anyway.
Yeah, this is going to be a big money year for the company. Now, we've gone over a few of them, but real quickly, what are the other indies that have popped up in the past year or so that will be contemporary with Wing?
At this point, there really wasn't in 1991. Universal Pro was still around. That would end up leading into Michinoku Pro. I had made mention, Pioneer Sensei had closed down at this point, and a lot of the guys of that promotion went over to Wing and joined their roster. But there was SWS, which was a big financial failure, but it was the promotion was a stature that they were running big buildings and everything, so they were still above Wing as far as stature goes, but they weren't, they were losing a lot of money, whereas Wing was kind of a smaller promotion that was making money at the beginning.
Cool. And okay, so to go and we're going to cover Wing mostly at the end, but we will be talking about it later. So to start out in June, FMW started the next tour on June 15th in Kawago, and there's a new few faces on the card. One of them being Mark Starr. Who is Mark Starr?
He was a Florida wrestler, Florida independent wrestler. He ended up, after FNW, going to WCW, kind of in a jobber role. That's probably who most people know him as. But so he was just a Florida wrestler that probably Mike Awesome, Horace Boulder probably, made a good word for, and they brought him in to join their group.
Cool. Another name is going to be Reggie Bennett. Now, I only know Reggie Bennett. She was on the ECW the '97 Barely Legal pay-per-view, and she gave this terrible power bomb. And I didn't know who she was. Who was she?
Well, before FMW, she was just a California independent women's wrestler. I'm guessing that Onita, might have still had contacts with maybe Benjamin Mora or someone like that in the California region, but I don't know exactly. But made some contacts from California, and she came in and kind of worked the monster heel role against Kudo. She ended up going to All Japan Women, and that's probably where most people would know her from AJW. She also ended up competing in LPWA, which was an American women's promotion. So she ended up making more of a bigger name for herself after FMW, but FMW was kind of where she got her name originally.
Cool. Now, just to kind of ask, so with the split with Victor Quinones leaving, there were guys like, as you said, Horace Boulder, Mike Awesome, that they were paired with him in storyline. When he left, was there any, did he help book those guys? Was there any friction with him leaving?
Yeah, he helped book them, but at this point they've got good deals. Pretty much with Wing, they spent a good deal of their money there to get Mr. Pogo to jump, to make Mr. Pogo, the face of the promotion. They weren't going to be able to afford, pay, Mike Awesome anywhere near what FMW was paying. So there was no real reason for anyone to jump or anything like that.
Cool. Now on June 19th, AG Azaki, he wrestled a handicap squash match against the Gladiator. He lost. He's only on a handful of shows. Was he considered a full-time talent, or were these more fill-in roles?
This was kind of a fill-in role. Last show I mentioned, he was kind of was a replacement. This one, they scheduled him for this match, him and Akihito Ichihara, for a handicap match, but it's pretty much just to put over Mike Awesome. So they came in and they told Mike Awesome, just beat the crap out of these guys. They're green young boys, make them pay their dues. And Mike Awesome beat the crap out of them so much that Azaki ended up vomiting black blood afterwards. He left the ring, went outside, and just started. And he looked and was like, "Oh, this isn't good." And it actually started the friendship with him and Shoshi Arai, who I mentioned last episode, where he was the ring announcer slash vice president. He saw Ezuki vomiting outside, and he tried taking care of him and everything like that. And actually, that's how a friendship started between those two.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
So on June 21st, in front of 4,000 fans in Sapporo, Tarzan Goto defeated Sambo Asaki in a barbed wire match, and it was listed as a stoppage by the ref. Now, Dave Meltzer wrote this as if it was an actual shoot stoppage. Was this an angle, or was it real?
It was an angle. They knew what was going to happen, but what he did was so Mr. Pogo had left, and they had Kawasaki Stadium booked, and the original main event was going to be Onita and versus Pogo. So they had to decide. They had to turn Tarzan Goto heel. So to get Tarzan Goto heel, what he did was, during the barbed wire match, he started cutting Sambo's arm up really bad, and it's deep. There's a deep cut, and the blood is gushing out of his arm. It's not a pretty sight at all. It's probably one of the worst sights I've seen as far as pictures when it comes to a cut in FMW. And so he just cuts his arm up really bad. And like I said, Goto at this time is a face. So this was to get over Goto as a heel. Like, why would you do that to one of your friends? And Onita took issue with it, and that's what ended up leading to their Kawasaki Stadium match.
June 22nd saw the debut of Masashi Honda. He lost his match. Who was this, and who would he go on to be?
This would be the future Mr. Ganasuke. Was that pretty much? He ended up being one of the top FMW heels in the later '90s for the promotion.
Now, real quick, there was this show on June 22nd. It was in a high school gym in front of 1,000 people, which for FMW at this time was kind of small. But the main event was a barbed wire death match. Were there any rules as to when they decided to do the death matches and when not to?
It was actually an elementary school, oddly enough, and they actually ended up having to change in the classrooms at the school. But it was pretty much just kind of when they felt it was needed. If they felt like they needed to make a barbed wire match to, this area was a very kind of rural area. There wasn't that many people in this area, so they felt like they needed to kind of spice the main event. So at this time, it's maybe one or two times a tour. Towards the end, they just decided, let's just go all out and do it every time. But at this point, it's still one or two times. So it's, there's still some novelty at this point. So after the show, actually, like I said, it was a rural area, and so there was only one hotel. And at this time, obviously, the heels and the faces can't stay at the same hotel because of kayfabe. So, with most of the heels being foreigners, they decided to give the foreigner heels the hotel. And the faces ended up having to stay at a campsite afterwards. So that's where they stayed the night, because there was no other hotel in this area. And so they're out drinking and, camping and everything like that. And this was actually, as you may mention, it was Honda's debut show, but it was also Ezuki considers this his debut show because the first two matches he had was he wasn't just kind of thrown in at the last minute. The other he was just thrown in to get beaten up. This was kind of to highlight him. So he always considered this his debut. So he and Honda kind of debuted together. And so Onita, during the campsite ceremony, or whatnot, and they're all hanging out the sides, he wants to pretty much have their graduation into the pro wrestling business. And to celebrate, he came up with an idea to stick firecrackers up their ass and set them off. And there was a photographer there and took pictures of the whole ordeal and put it on and put it in the magazines and everything. And it was kind of a pretty popular thing at the time, just because it was so like, oh my gosh, look what happened, what's this. And so it was kind of, and it ends up taking into a storyline 8 years later between the two. But it was an interesting, kind of story for me to tell as far as Ezuki and Honda's debut.
You answered my question. I was going to ask, is that why they did the anal explosion match?
Yeah, that's where it set it up. Yeah, that's what set it up 8 years later.
It's weird how a little bit of context makes that a little more sane.
Yeah.
Cool. So where was I? Oh, there we go. So on the 26th, there was a match between Azaki and Honda, the future Hayabusa, and Mr. Ganosuke. Whenever I think of one, I always think of the other. How close were they?
They were really close. So they became friends in college. I may mention to it last episode. They both were big wrestling fans growing up, and they ended up attending the same college in Kumamoto that had its own wrestling promotion in the college, and they had tryouts and everything to join, to compete in these wrestling shows at the college. And the first, Ezuki, Honda, and another wrestler were accepted into the promotion the same day. And after they got accepted, they all went out to their dorm and drank, and they got so drunk that Ezuki had to go vomit and everything for being so drunk. And as he came out of the toilet, he heard someone else vomiting, and he saw it was Honda. And Ezuki goes, "Oh, I'm never gonna be this stupid again." And Honda responded, "You're a wrestler now. You're supposed to be stupid." And that was kind of the birth of their friendship that ended up, taking them the rest of their lives. So they had been friends for about 4 years, even before they tried out for FMW.
It's awesome. It's like a little bit of a bromance of them puking, and then a heart forms around them. So just to finish up, the June tour finished with a 6-man street fight among the main eventers at Kuroken Hall on the 29th. But also sometime during this tour, Onita hires Takashi Ito. Who was he? Why was he hired? And what did he do for the company?
He was there were tryouts for referees, and so he ended up trying out and getting the job. So at this point, he's still just the referee, but also he spoke pretty good English, so that was a big thing as well, because they were bringing in so many foreigners and to kind of direct the matches. Someone like that was really needed. But he also ended up becoming the booker, and he's probably one of the main reasons, and he's definitely forgotten in time, but he's one of the reasons FMW was so popular, because he kind of kept everything straight during the Onita era as well as afterwards with Hayabusa. So all the storylines and all that, that people enjoy, they probably Goito probably came up with those ideas.
Now, during the break of shows, Dave Meltzer wrote that Onita went to Florida to sway Jimmy Backlund to not go to Wing. Was Backlund seen as a guy to keep, or was it just to avoid the image of a raid on talent?
Yeah, probably just a raid on talent, because he was just a junior heavyweight. He was competing with Ricky Fuji. He never really was, a main guy to take on Onita in main events or anything like that. So he was a mid-carder. So it was probably just, we don't want to lose you. We like you. And I believe he stayed, but he would end up eventually going to Wing anyway.
Now, also during this time, there was a multi-month coverage that Onita is trying to co-promote a show in August. It would be in Calgary, and it was going to be in like a 12,000 size seat place, but it never happened. Obviously, do you know any information about this show and why it just never happened?
It was probably through Fred Jung, who I may mention, it's kind of the Calgary, who brought in the Calgary wrestlers through his contact with Onita. From what I've been told, Fred Jung was a very shady person. And, Onita always wanted to take FMW elsewhere. He wanted this to be a, international, worldwide promotion. And so he's probably talking with Fred Jung, and Fred Jung's going, yeah, we can bring you over, and we can, you could bring your guys in, and we can hold a show, big show. And, he probably was just talking out of his mouth. There was no legitimate, possibility really of FMW being able to run that kind of show at least, successfully. So it was probably just talk through Fred Jung, who, like I may mention, just would lie, and a lot of, just a person, a lot of people in the business are shady, and he's one of them.
Awesome. On July 13th, I just want to say this, in New Japan, Matsunaga defeated Aoyagi in a match. Now, Matsunaga is going to join Wing soon, and he's going to become the Matsunaga that we know now. But what is his career like at this point?
Yeah, he's still a follower of Aoyagi. He's still in Aoyagi's group. Like I made mention, they left FMW to join Pioneer Sensei because they offered more money, and then Pioneer Sensei went bankrupt, closed down, and so they found a home, a temporary home in New Japan, who was willing to do kind of, have those kind of strong style mixed martial arts, well, different style matches. And so, yeah, Matsunaga won this match to set up Aoyagi beating him in Nagoya. And that was pretty much it after Matsunaga ended up leaving after that show.
Cool. Now, some foreigners coming into the next tour, which I've always been pretty curious about. One of them is Big Titan. Who was Big Titan?
It was Rick Bogner. He came in through the Calgary territory. Again, that would have been through Fred Jung. A really big guy, kind of like Mike Awesome. Had kind of a similar look, except was blonde instead. So they could have two giants in the promotion. Two giant heels. He ended up becoming. He's most famously known as the fake Razor Ramon in WWF. He ended up. That was a big flop for about 3 or 4 months there in 96, 97. He ended up going to USWA after that. And then before WWF, he ended up leaving to join War with Tenryu. But then, like I said, he went to WWF and then USWA. And then he ended up finding a spot in New Japan for a little while before retiring.
Another person is going to be Hurricane Walker. Who's that?
That's Bobby Walker, probably best known as WCW Jobber, but he had a boxing background at this time, so they brought him in as a boxer to compete on the shows.
Now, with Kanonis gone, who is booking the foreign talent?
It's kind of like Onita or whatnot, just the office itself, kind of trial case by case situation. Like I said, Fred Jung would be, talking to, someone in the company, Ricky Fuji or someone like, hey, I got, Big Titan. If you want, will you tell Onita? And, Ricky Fuji would go to Onita, things like that. There was some, like I may mention Reggie Bennett through California. So somebody in California was in contact with someone in the, either Onita or someone else in the office. Florida probably was through Tarzan Goto. So it just depends on who, what specific territory someone knew. But there wasn't a Victor Ganones to, just go, hey, I know 50 guys from Puerto Rico I can bring in. So that's kind of was the difference.
On July 29th, FMW ran a parking lot show in Osaka. Now, these parking lot shows are kind of popular. I'm just curious, what are the logistics? Do you have to buy the lot for the day? Are there any different safety rules?
Yeah, you just got to buy the lot pretty much, and then just kind of close it out. It's going to be a large parking lot, obviously, and then they have two buses, and that's the dressing room for the wrestlers. And so, they afterwards. So I don't think the wrestlers enjoyed having them too much because they'd have to wrestle and then just get back on the bus and stay on the bus, and they couldn't take a shower or anything until they got back to the hotel. So it's kind of that kind of that style that FMW is best known for, kind of this poor, or at least what Onita would try to come off as is like, oh, we're a poor, gritty promotion. Look what we're, willing to do, But so, but yeah, as far as just they would just have to rent the lot out itself.
Japan is a very official country. Like there are lots of rules and stuff, but the wrestling is not regulated, and it seems like anyone can do anything. Which in America, you would need so many permits to do these kind of things.
Yeah.
So for the remainder of the tour, they just keep kind of recycling the main events with Goto, Onita, Gladiator, Fuji, Asako, and it just seems it's those guys over and over and over. Is there any type of fatigue from fans of seeing the same guys?
No, because at this point they're still just touring around the country. So, they might have the same show, the day before, even with just maybe one guy different in the main event. But, that was a different city. That group didn't know, they didn't know that match was going to happen. They didn't know that match the day before happened. So they would just kind of run the same group. But, at this time they're making so much money that again, it doesn't really matter because they're not seeing, it's a different crowd each time. So they're not seeing the same match, but also what they know is Onita and he's really popular. I want to go see Onita. So that's, so they're drawing pretty well at this point.
August 7th saw the debut of Wing at Kuroken Hall in front of a sold-out audience. A few guys I want to go over. One of them being the Headhunters.
Yeah, they were two Puerto Rican twins. At this point, they're actually not that big. They ended up becoming very, heavy later on. But at this point, they're kind of skinny. But yeah, they just came in through Victor Canones. That he thought, hey, here's two twins that could, hit a moonsault. So it was kind of a novelty, and so he brought them in.
So they are not the sons of Abdullah, right?
No, no, no. Abdullah is African American, and they're Puerto Rican.
Okay, cool. Actually, he's African Canadian, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay. Another one is going to be Gypsy Joe. What was his reputation at this time?
He was known in Japan as a brawler in the IWE promotion. I kind of went over that a couple episodes ago. That was kind of the original third promotion up against New Japan and All Japan. They were, they would have street fights kind of and, cage matches and blood and whatnot. So, not to the level obviously that FMW did, but it was kind of known as like a gritty kind of promotion, poor in throughout the 70s. So he was, he'd been well known 20 years prior as, a kind of a street fight brawler.
Cool. And finally, Fishman.
He was a lucha libre wrestler from Mexico. He wrestled in AAA and WWA. He actually just recently passed away earlier this year, but he was just a lucha libre wrestler that was, could do high flying and everything.
Cool. And then I saw this one, I was dumbstruck by seeing this guy on the show. But it's Hideko Hosaka.
Hideki Hosaka, yeah, that's he came in through the SAW group, which was pretty much submission art wrestling. So he kind of at this time was based out of just training on kind of submission type style wrestling and everything. And they brought him in to become along with a couple other guys, Kochihiro Kimura, who would wrestle in FMW and whatnot. They brought him in, they brought him in through Kiyoshi Osako, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But he was a big fan of the submission art style wrestling, so he brought Hosaka in.
Cool. And finally, just to ask, Wing, they ran the full tour in August with Mr. Pogo on top, and they did pretty good business. What was the Wing style, and what type of matches are Mr. Pogo doing? I mean, is he bringing out the knives and stuff?
He eventually did. Not at this point. not this early on, but he would kind of start bringing it in later in 1992. But yeah, it's brawling, it's blood, it's street fights, brawl over the building. Kind of they didn't have the money obviously that FMW did, so there was no explosion type matches or anything like that ever. But anything that they could kind of run, that they could do for a cheaper price, to have, they were willing to do. So like I said, they would have barbed wire kind of spider net type matches, or later on they'd have fire and whatnot. But so anything that wasn't too costly to do, they would be willing to do it.
Cool. Now, we're going to get into some pretty big shows coming up here. On August 17th, FMW, they ran a one-night barbed wire tournament in front of 48,000 fans. Now, this was some type of rock concert split show?
Yeah, they ran with the kind of a punk rock band that was connected with Onita. So they agreed to kind of run a wrestling show and then have a concert. So they split the gate. I don't know, percentage wise, who got most of the money. I would imagine it was the rock. I would imagine the rock concert probably got most of the gate because it was probably more of a rock concert based crowd. But yeah, they decided to have a show right beforehand, before the concert. So yeah, this was their biggest show at the time, but it wasn't fully because of FMW.
Yeah, just to ask a quick question. This summer I took a friend to Japan, and he'd never really seen a lot of live shows there, and we went to shows for Stardoms and BJW and a few other feds, and on the final night we went to the Tokyo Deathmatch Carnival under Freedoms, and he immediately said, he goes, I don't think that these guys are wrestling fans. I think they're only Freedom fans. Did FMW have a similar type of fan base?
Kinda. They were different type of, kind of the ECW kind of group. They're different. They're not the WWF kind of fans or whatnot. They have a different attitude. They have a different style. They're into different things. But like at this time, it's kind of like your own team. This is my team. Like we're a sports team. This is my I'm following this team. This is the team I'm into. That's kind of how the Japanese promotions are, where you're loyal to this group of wrestlers, and so, or this group of this promotion. So Onita was something different than Inoki or Muda or Jumbo Tsuruta or Stan Hansen. He had his own style, and attracted a different group of fans than what was New Japan and All Japan had collected.
Cool. Now, as I said, it was a no rope barbed wire tournament, so all of the matches were no rope barbed wire, but there were matches between the rounds. Did they take the barbed wire down and then put it back up, or were there separate rings?
No, I was wondering. Yeah, they would just set it up. And we probably had long intermissions and everything like that. I think the show took a couple hours and whatnot. So I would imagine they just would put the ropes back up and everything in between the matches.
To go over just a few of the matches, Onita defeated Ricky Fuji by forfeit. Was this some sort of angle?
Yeah, well, I think he probably, Ricky Fuji won the match beforehand, and probably took a bad bump or something like that. But I would imagine what it was planned, because just to kind of save time and not have Onita come out multiple times. The third time seeing Onita might take away from the pop or anything in the last match, or the heat. So it's probably just to move things along faster.
Cool. And in the main event, Onita defeated Sambo Asako in an exploding barbed wire match. What type of explosions were these? Were these like the landmines outside, or were they connected to the
No.
ropes?
Yeah, just the ropes. It's just the standard exploding barbed wire, where you hit the ropes, you hit the barbed wire ropes, and there's you get the explosion on you.
Pop, 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 pop. Yeah. Not on the show is going to be Tarzan Goto. I'm guessing this was just done so that he wouldn't have to either lose or face off with Onita, right?
Yeah, there was no reason to put him on the show. Like I said, there's already, the gate was, if people came for this show either for the rock concert or to see FMW, they didn't come to see anyone else besides Onita. This wasn't a standard, FMW show or anything like that. So there's no reason to put in Goto, especially in the tournament, to where he would either have to lose or something like that, with the Kawasaki show a month away. So they just decided there was no point in having him on the show.
Dave Meltzer wrote that highlights from this rock show aired on Fuji TV. Do you know if that's true?
I'm sure it is. I mean, I haven't seen the highlights or anything like that on any of the tapes I have, but I'm sure it is. It's they would, they'll randomly show, like they'll have Onita on a talk show and they'll show the highlights, and and I mean, even to this past year they did this where Onita joins a TV show and they show the highlights of what the exploding barbed wire match that they had, and they have the host freaking out, seeing something they've never seen before. So it's things like that. So it was just to show, like, look this type of match that's going on.
One thing, maybe I'm sure you don't know the exact answer, but just to ask, I've seen highlights of there was a match where Minoru Suzuki, he appeared on a Japanese game show, and he was hit in the head with an object during a game, and he began bleeding, and they had to censor his face. And then the Freedoms wrestlers were on a show earlier in the year, and again they got kind of cut open doing a simple spot, and they had to blur his face. I've heard that that Japanese television has the network television, they have a strict no blood policy. Do you know if this affected being able to show these highlights, or do you know anything about that?
I don't think there was actually too much blood on the show. They might have picked specific, and I'm sure they just picked the Sambo and Onita match. And a lot of the times, those kind of matches, Onita doesn't really necessarily bleed unless it's cut arm or anything like that. So they might have just shown certain clips where and off the top of my head, I don't remember if Onita bled in the arm, but I know he didn't bleed on it forehead wise or anything like that. So they might have just not really bled during that during that match.
Great. So just to go over, the weekly Pro Wrestling Awards came out at this time. Onita placed fourth on Fan Favorite. The Onita versus Pogo Landmine match came in third for the best singles match, which says a lot about the attraction of the gimmick matches at the time, and some of the women's matches in FMW placed as well. Moving on to the next month in September, we have a couple new faces. There is a wrestler who he's listed as two names, either Turtle Man or Turtle Mask. Do you know who this was?
No, there's no information on him at all. I'm sure it was a foreigner, I'm gonna guess, but or maybe a Mexican wrestler. But there is no information on Turtle Mask. He only showed up for one tour. I mean, obviously it was a Ninja Turtle ripoff. Obviously with Ninja Turtles being really popular at the time. And also they had started in Mexico, all four Ninja Turtles wrestling in Mexico at the time. So it was a popular gimmick, and with Ninja Turtles being so popular at the time, FMW tried it out, but I don't know if it got over because he never came back afterwards, or at least that gimmick never came back after this tour. But I never was able to find out who actually was under the mask.
Another new guy is going to be Billy Mack. I've never heard of Billy Mack before.
He was a Florida wrestler. He actually came in the very first FMW show, the first in October. He probably was brought in through Tarzan Goto. I'm going to guess with Goto's Florida connection. But he came into the first tour, and this was his return 2 years later.
Okay, we're now in the home stretch. FMW ran a dozen or so shows leading up to the September 23rd Kawasaki show, where they brought in 33,000 fans plus to the Kawasaki Baseball Stadium. The Kawasaki Baseball Stadium would become FMW's big, I don't know if you want to call it their home, but it's where they would run their big shows. Yeah, the holy ground, yeah. Now, you wrote that this was a WrestleMania-style make-or-break event. What type of investment were they making on the show?
Yeah, I mean, this is their big, like I mentioned, the last stadium show, they weren't fitting, necessarily putting the bill down where if it was a bomb, they weren't going to get hit too hard because that was the rock concert mostly. But this one, this was their first stadium show. This was, prior to this, they'd ran, 8,000. I don't think they've ever run, double digits really at this point, 8,000 seat shows. Here we are, and they're running over a 40,000 seat building now. So they might not have had, necessarily closed down afterwards. But if this was a bomb, I mean, they probably, I don't know if they've been able to really recover. IWA Japan, ran this building, 4 years later. And for how popular, the King of the Deathmatch show is, it kind of it kind of killed the promotion, really, being an everyday, running a tour every month type promotion. And they weren't really able to recover from it. And, that's what FMW was, running up against, where and also it would have been considered, oh, you're a failure. You ran this show and it bombed, and here you are trying to trying to act like you're a legitimate promotion. And, it would kind of, really hurt the image of FMW if it had bombed. So, like I said, it probably wouldn't have closed down right away, but it probably would have eventually led to the death of of FMW if things hadn't picked up. If things had kind of taken a hit from that, it probably would have closed down a year later. So.
In the main event, Onita defeated Tarzan Goto in the first barbed wire exploding cage match. Was there any specific genesis of doing it inside the cage, or was it just one more gimmick to kind of throw at people?
Yeah, they had to have it different than the exploding barbed wire, because they had just done the exploding barbed wire match between the two a year ago. So they wanted to, have something different really for this show. And there was no exploding rings back then, so they came up with the exploding barbed wire and in a cage death match. And Kawasaki Stadium is big enough to hold this giant cage of, around the ring, so that they were able to, have something different than the year prior.
And what was the end of match angle?
They pretty much Onita defeated Tarzan Goto, and they embraced again, and Goto turned face once again. So it's at this point it's becoming an annual thing where Goto turns heel, challenges Onita, Onita beats him, and they go back. Goto goes back to being the number 2 face of the FMW.
Also debuting on the show, and I'm going to say this totally wrong, Svetlana Gundarenko debuted on the show, defeating Megumi Kudo. Who was Svetlana?
She was a Russian judo fighter. She's a very, very big woman, and she had, kind of the legitimate background that, I don't know if it was through Grigory Verdashev, but it was kind of, that type of, I'm sure it was the same connection at least. But they brought her in, and she, like I said, she was a legitimate badass. She ended up competing after FMW. She ended up competing in Vale Tudo and possibly UFC Japan. Or I don't know if it's UFC Japan, but definitely shoot style promotions in Japan. Cage style tournament matches later on. So which she would win. So she was a very legitimate fighter.
Awesome. Now, at this point, FMW, they've run multiple shows attended by 15, 20,000 plus. They ran their own show attended by 30,000 plus. They've done split shows at 40,000 plus, and they're consistently doing 2 to 4,000 fans at most shows everywhere they go. What is FMW's attendance like compared to AJPW and NJPW?
So at this point, Japan is going through a boom period. So all all 3 of those promotions are doing really well. New Japan is still doing, sellouts throughout. They're still going to Tokyo Dome multiple, at least once or twice a year at this point. All Japan is going to start running Budokan Hall 4 times a year and sell it out every single time. And the house shows, New Japan and All Japan were still doing better. So FMW is doing really well, and they're growing, but they're still a distant number 3, which they would always end up being. But they for however big FMW was growing, All Japan and New Japan were growing just as big.
Awesome. Now, I've got to ask a question that maybe you don't know the answer to. Dave Meltzer wrote in September, Wing ran a TV taping studio shows at a Japanese cable station in Tokyo. Now, I've seen the Wing tour videos and such, but I've never seen these shows where they were taping inside of a studio in front of 100 people. Were these tapings real? Did they air? Did they ever make video?
And they never made video. I never heard about this. I do know, and I wonder if he confused FMW doing this, because they actually around this time period ran a studio show with Onita watching, sitting there watching on commentator as a commentator, and a match between Pandita and the Ultra, the Damien as Ultra or Amigo Ultra, the Ultraman gimmick. They had a comedy match that was a studio show that made national TV. They aired it on on one of the national TVs as kind of a promotion for FMW. But I had never heard of Wing doing it, so if they did, it wasn't promoted very well because I've never heard of it.
All right, cool. Yeah. I'd never heard of this, and I read it, and I was like, because studio TV in Japan is not, it was never a thing compared to the territories. It just sounded too interesting. Um, Now, FMW opened the next tour on October 9th, and they brought in Jericho and Lance Storm. They were called the Thrill Seekers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. They debuted in the main event, teaming with Mark Starr taking the fall. What were their reputation at this point, and why were they booked to go straight into the main event? And throughout the tour, it seemed like they were protected the whole tour.
They were brought in through Fred Young, through the Calgary connection. They came in, and I would imagine just Onita, here's fresh blood. Let's get them over, in the main event. Here I can have a different opponent, like you made mention. Onita had been facing the same guys. Maybe he just wanted to see someone else new, kind of evaluate their talent by having a match with them. I know that they found out that they were in the main event the day of the show because back then, how you found out was, Goito or someone would post just the lineup of the show right there on, in the backstage in the locker room, and they went up and they read it, and when they first read it, they thought they weren't even on the show, and they got all mad going, "You brought us in to not even be on the show." But then they found out, through the Japanese English, it was Rant Storm and, Chris Jericho, things like that. So they ended up finding out, afterwards that they actually were in the main event. But I think it was just to kind of see, who these guys were, just, but as far as reputations, they were only a year into the business. They were still green. They were just happy to be, or at least Jericho was very just happy to be in Japan.
Now, missing from these from a few shows is going to be Masashi Shihonda, and later in the tour he debuts as Mr. Ganosuke. Uh, who came up with the gimmick change, and where does this name come from?
So when Tarzan Goto was running the FMW dojo, Honda and Ezuki are, every day working in the dojo and training and whatnot. Tarzan Goto just decided, Honda, you look like Ashaya Honda, or oh, sorry, Ashaya Ganosuke, who was a TV celebrity at the time. And he also he started naming in the dojo Honda Ganosuke. So, Hayabusa was called Kin from a from a singer in Japan. I forget the last name, but so like even to this day, Tarzan Goto, if he's referring to Honda or Ezuki or Hayabusa or Ganosuke, he's referring to Honda as Ganosuke because of Ashaya Ashaya Ganosuke, and he's referring to Hayabusa as Kin.
All right, cool. Okay, there's this thing coming up. I read this and it just sounded so funny to me. Dave Meltzer writes that Onita started starring on a Nippon TV Sunday night comedy show where he does a 10-minute Dear Abby segment. He reads lovelorn problem letters and he cries and does his Onita theater. How long did Onita do this, and have you ever seen these?
I've never seen that one specific. I've seen Onita on TV shows 1,000 times, and I might have even seen it and not known what I was watching. But I do know, Onita, obviously, with his past of women and whatnot, he actually, kind of had a reputation as a ladies' man back then. He wrote a book even on, how to win a woman over, and things like that. So, at this time, he's kind of considered, a sex symbol at this point with a lot of the women.
It just sounds so funny. So November, we're in the home stretch of the year. November saw the beginning of the FMW Tag League. We have a lot of new people coming in over the next 2 months. Just to start off with, one of the teams that debut is going to be the Mercenaries. Who were they?
That was Billy Anderson and the future Louis Spicolli. They came in from California as well. So whoever brought in Reggie Bennett brought to come in probably brought them over as well.
And do you know the story that Sabu
Yeah,
told?
the pea in a bottle story. Yeah.
Yeah, did that happen during this tour?
I don't believe so because I believe he toured a couple more times. Because because he even compete. That would have been '92 because when FMW went to Tijuana, he worked those shows as well. And then I think it was the summer of '92 when it would have happened.
Okay, we'll cover that when it happens because that's a strange story as well. Some more new talent is going to be Chris Cruz Christopher. Who is this?
I could not find any information about her. She's an American women's boxer. But as far as any information on who she was, if she worked any shows or anything like that, there is no information. And I checked every possible website there could be, Japanese, English. There's no information on her at all.
Cool. And finally, Calypso Jim.
That was Bobo Brazil Jr. So that's Bobo Brazil's son. Who had worked in the Indianapolis territory with Dick the Bruiser, and they brought him in under a boxer gimmick. So I guess he had a boxing background as well. So during this tournament, he's a boxer.
Yeah, that'll come up more soon. And finally, the last big team of the first leg of the tour is going to be Sabu and the Sheik. What was the Sheik's reputation in Japan?
He's a legend. So, he was very popular through the 70s and 80s as kind of one of Giant Baba's rivals in all Japan, teaming up with Abdul the Butcher, and having those bloody matches all around the building and everything. So he was very, very, considered a legend. He's very well known, and he was up in age at this point, but he still had name value, and so that's why Onita brought him in.
And what was Sabu's history?
So he was just pretty much just brought in because he was the Sheik's nephew. They said, hey Sheik, we want you in this tournament. Well, who's gonna, can I bring in my own partner? Sure, we don't care, So he brought in his nephew Sabu, who he'd worked the Michigan territory, or the Michigan Independents. He had worked USWA at this point, but there was no name value to Sabu at all. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody in America really knew who he was. So. But he came in during this first show and he got himself over with how crazy and just all over the place he was.
My aunt actually, she used to go to the big time wrestling in Detroit, and she had a Polaroid with the two of them from 1990, somewhere around that time period.
So that's probably around that time period. So he probably worked big time and Memphis, or I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, he was still doing the Elephant Boy turban and everything. Yeah. On November 20th in Osaka, FMW and All Japan, they ran back-to-back shows in the same building. FMW ran first and All Japan ran second. Now, All Japan sold out their show, but FMW did not, and this led to this emblazoned Paul Heyman style, us versus them kind of thing. No real question, but it's just one of those things of Onita being Onita, and it's so great the way you kind of rally fans to defend your promotion, I guess. Going on November 24th, there was a random singles match between Sabu and Azaki, the future Hayabusa. Have you ever heard any stories about the relationship between these two? Because in many fans' eyes, they're kind of linked as like the hardcore high-flying icons.
Yeah, Azaki came in and was originally Onita's, kind of his student, his, personal assistant, help him with everything. And Onita ended up firing him after just a couple days. And so Azaki ended up becoming the Sheik's personal assistant. So he would actually, help the Sheik, like carry his bags and all that stuff. So he was around both of them a lot, and he really looked up to Sabu a lot. The Sheik loved Azaki. he called him the golden boy, because he saw all the talent that he had and just, a couple months into the business. So he was around Sabu a lot. And so at this time, he really looked up to he really looked up to Sabu. As a couple years later, when Hayabusa, or when Ezaki became Hayabusa, in the kind of the same look, just with the mask and whatnot, Sabu was really upset over that, kind of thinking he stole his gimmick. But as time went by, they became really good friends. They drink together, hang out together, stuff like that. I mean, after Hayabusa's accident, they loved each other pretty much. And whenever Sabu would go to Japan, he'd always make a stop to see Hayabusa.
Cool. Now, at the end of the tour, Leon Spinks came in to tag with Rufus Blackburn. Leon Spinks is someone I've always heard about. The fact he was on the FMW shows was always highlighted as one of the oddities of FMW. Who was Spinks?
He's a former heavyweight champion in boxing, so he was a really well-known name in the '70s. So that he ended up, it was a household name pretty much, and a lot of people still, know that, at least know his, gap in his teeth. That's kind of his signature look and everything. So he was a really, well-known person back then, and Jerry Lawler brought him in to Memphis, to kind of get on his name recognition. And he's a horrible wrestler, but he was a legitimate, heavyweight champion in the world in boxing when that mattered. So, I believe, I believe he fought Muhammad Ali, somewhere in there as well. So, like I said, just big name acquisition, but not very good at wrestling.
And his partner, Rufus Blackburn, I've seen his name spelled a few different ways. Who was he?
There was not really much information on him either. He's about a 50-year-old white bald man. That was a boxer as well. It seems like there's not too much information on the boxers that I could find from the early '90s, and I just wonder if they didn't have any real wrestling experience and just had boxing experience. But there's no real information on him that I could find other than he's just an American that they just brought in to just kind of be Leon Spink's job tag partner.
During this tournament, there was some pretty, with so many different kinds of guys on the card, we had some weird matchups, and one of them that stood out was Leon Spinks had a knockout win over Sabu in a singles match, and that just sounds so crazy to me. I don't know why. In early December, Onita lost a 5-minute match to the Sheik. As we've said a few times, Onita only loses 2 or 3 times a year, it seems. Why was the Sheik chosen for this loss, and did it lead anywhere?
Yeah, it was going to lead to 1992 and them having a feud pretty much all year. With Tarzan Goto, face heel, they couldn't really do it too much. They couldn't go to that anymore. They had to create, new top heels for Onita to face, and so they brought in the Sheik, who, like I mentioned, was a legitimate name had fame, and a lot of people knew him in Japan. So they brought him they brought him and Leon Spinks to kind of set future matches with Onita. But they had the Sheik match first. And this is just to get Sheik over, show like, hey, look, he could still beat Onita, so that they could have future matches going into 1992.
Now, the finals of this were held on December 9th at the Tokyo Bay NKK Hall. Was this a type of television studio?
No, it's a building that's actually on in Disneyland, in Japan Disneyland's territory, and so. But pretty much what it is, it's mostly New Japan would run it around this time. I think SWS ran it one time. This was the only time FMW ran it, but it was mostly shoe promotions that would run it. I think there was a UFC Japan there. Lots of just any type of shoot style promotions would run it throughout the '90s.
And just for note, in the finals, Onita and Goto, they would win the tournament, and they would win the tag team titles. I don't have it in my notes. Were these the FMW tag team titles, or did they have a different name?
No, they were the WWA martial arts tag team titles at this time.
one note I skipped up there that I forgot was this is the year where Onita changed the name of the company. Now we talked about this in the first episode, which was a hodgepodge. Um, why did Onita change the name, and what did it be, and what did he change it to?
I think that actually he changed it a little later on. I think it wasn't until a couple years later, like 93, 94, that he changed the name to just officially FMW Incorporated. That was the name of the company. He started off as Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling, changed it to FMW just because by that time there wasn't really no martial arts going on, and it just really became death matches, and it was just easier when filling out paperwork and all that, just to write FMW instead of the whole name, name in English or whatnot. So pretty much it was just simply, make it easier, and they had kind of gone away from the martial arts style at this time.
Okay, are there any other fun notes from this tag team series?
Well, yeah, after Onita and Goto win the tournament, the Sheik and Sabu rush the ring, and the Sheik ends up throwing a fireball at Onita, blinding him for the time being to set up their feud going into 1992.
Oh man, I should save my comments, but I'm gonna save my comments, but this is gonna lead to one of the stupidest matches I've ever seen in my life. So okay, cool. Now, a final note that Dave notes on the FMW side is that at the end of the year, on December 26th, Tarzan Goto is attending various indie shows in Florida. Do you know if there was any real reason for him to be there, or was he just having fun during his off time?
No, I believe that's where his wife was, his wife and children. Like we, talked about earlier, Despina. She, was an American women's wrestler that wrestled at the beginning of FMW, and they had a home in Florida, and so he would go in between tours to go see his family, and so he's probably scouting talent at this point as well, just to see what other Florida talent, we made mention of, Billy Mack and Mark Starr, and things like that. So he is just kind of, probably just checking out the territory just to see, what was, who he could possibly help bring in.
Cool. So that's gonna be it for FMW for 1991. A couple quick wing notes that I found. At the end, by the end of the year, the wing business is kind of petered off. They're not selling out shows. The Kirk and Hall attendance is down by about half, and they run into a lot of problems with money. And it's agreed that the group is going to split into two companies, with the other being the WMA, the World Martial Arts Association. I've never heard of the WMA. Did this split happen, or what is the story behind this?
Yeah, so what that is, and as far as finances go, I had never actually heard too much about Wing struggling at the beginning. They would struggle later on in 93, late 92. So if there was a struggle, it might have just been them expecting to have done better than they were. But they weren't near bankruptcy at this point or anything like that. But what happened was, as we talked about earlier, Miki Ibaragi and Kiyoshi Osako, they were part of the FMW group that split away to form Wing, and Osako was actually kind of the big starting point with the whole martial arts aspect. He was kind of in with the Ayagi group and all that to help set up that feud with Onita and Ayagi and start FMW. So he's a big, karate style, shoot style fan. And so when Wing gets started, Mickey wants Wing to be, death matches, and Kiyoshi Osako wants it to be more martial arts style. And so they have a disagreement on where they want Wing to go, as what kind of promotion it's going to be. And so Osako, they end up breaking up pretty much and splitting, and Osako forms the World Martial Arts Association. He takes in, Adiki Osaka and all the other, SAW, or just any. I believe one of them was Nobuhiro Tsurumaki. just former, just kind of the Wing wrestlers that kind of have a shoot background. They leave Wing to form this promotion that never gets off the ground, never takes off anything, never has a show. It ends up dying by January. But like I said, it never even has a show, and so all those guys leave, and they no longer have a home. And Osako ends up leaving the business after that breakup and is never heard of again in the pro wrestling business.
I'm just curious. This WMA split off that never takes shape. Is this how Matsunaga joined the company?
Well, I don't believe so because he ended up joining later on. He didn't join right away, and but he would have. I mean, he might have been brought in through Osako maybe, but he, obviously adapted to the death matches. He didn't like leave with the promotion. He didn't leave with the WMA group or anything like that.
No, I just thought that maybe they were contacting talent to join, and then when it folded, they saw the sister promotion still going. Because I'm always wondering how people wind up in these companies. Well, okay, that's about it. Are there any other notes about Wing that you want to go over?
No, I think that's it as far as 1991. 1992 ended up, being a big year for them, though. They end up getting Matsunaga in, and they kind of, see what he has, and they end up making him kind of the top face of the promotion to go up against Mr. Pogo for 92.
Cool. All right. Well, that's about it for us.
Bahu's FMW World, which is bahufmw.com or fmwwrestling.us. Bahu FMW on Twitter, Bahu FMW World on Instagram, and also Brett FMW on YouTube, where I every so often will create a career music video of FMW wrestlers.
Brett's Twitter is my go-to for all things FMW. If I ever want to know what's going on, I just type in Bahu and I go to his Twitter and find it out. I have a website, indiewrestlingintl.wordpress.com, where I do 3 or 4 times a month. I do this indie write-up covering Freedoms and BJW and kind of point people to what Bahu's talking about. Just to note, Jun Kasai is out of the hospital, and he's going to have his return show on November 13th in Kurokan Hall for Freedoms, so that's exciting for him. And they have some new stars debuting, so Freedoms is kind of on an upshot leading up to the Christmas show. And that's about it. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll come back next time with 1992.
Yeah!